Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, welcome back to the Koala podcast. Today we are in Washington, D.C., a very snowed in Washington, D.C., speaking to Pamela Epstein. She's just going to talk to us about her company, what she does there. And then, as I said in the preamble to her, I'm going to give her the really lovely job of explaining where we are with federal rules and hemp. I won't force discussing the endless amendments in Ohio on her, because I think both our heads would explode if we went that far. But Pamela, thank you for taking time to be on the Karma Koala podcast.
Yeah, Sean, thanks for having me on. I every day do some risk mitigation and understanding.
That's going to keep you busy in this business, isn't it?
Absolutely, because I produce a hemp product, a non-intoxicating terpene hemp product, so an ingredient house, as it were. And we service both the cannabinoid industry, which is made up of both hemp and cannabis, and their traditional market with a flavor and a fragrance ingredient. So that always keeps me busy.
Are you working in with that 0.03 sort of range of products? Is that what you guys do?
We make an essential oil that is a flavor and a fragrance. So we come from compliant hemp material, which, as defined under the Farm Bill, is less than 0.3% on a dry weight basis in the field. So when we get into the weeds of what is hemp and what is not, and what happened in the FY26 omnibus language, we really are an industrial application. So when you think about the cannabis sativa L plant, it's a difference without a distinction, right? Hemp and marijuana are the same. The body and the brain.
Thank you very much. The conversation we all love to have, but nobody wants to talk about it.
Exactly. So we navigate those waters while producing a industrial hemp product.
And do the people you're talking to in policy understand these distinctions post Farm Bill 2019, and with all the drama that's happened since we're really talking? I mean, it's always been drama, but I mean, it really kicked in after Easter last year, didn't it?
Yeah, so I think policymakers are always trying to gain insight. And here it's particularly vexing because the botany doesn't match the conversations that are happening from a regulatory perspective. And consumers are being inundated with THC, and we're seeing that the general consumer is interested in wellness. They're interested in these products. They're interested in access. And so I would say they are learning, but they are learning while the industry is shifting and changing, and that becomes really difficult. It's one of the reasons that Terpene Bell and Nexus have decided to do a grant proposal to study what are the naturally existing flavor compounds in the cannabis plant. So we did that so that we can have a better understanding, a scientifically grounded understanding of what our product is, which is a product in the range of products that the hemp plant produces. So beyond cannabinoids, it produces terpenes. We actually work with a local, the Department of Cannabis Control and the University.
So that's the local one in DC, is it?
Nope, that's the Department of Cannabis Control in California.
Okay. Oh, so actually somebody who sort of knows what they're talking about.
Right. So each of the state, like we have the federal government overlay, which cannabis is still on Schedule 1. Hemp was carved out of Schedule 1 on a 0.3 by dry weight basis. For the listeners that are listening, why we have this quagmire of so much THC traversing interstate commerce while it's still Schedule 1 is because 0.3% is an escalating weight basis. right? So flour, as you can imagine, is light and airy. It weighs the same every time. 0.3% is truly de minimis. Well, what happened in the Farm Bill, besides a definition that says all extracts, all derivatives, all salts and isomers of salts, was it is an escalating weight function. So if you think about it in terms of food, we weigh food in this country in grams. We express cannabis concentration in milligrams. So that's 1 to 1,000. If you take an average size chocolate bar, which weighs around 50 grams, then you take 0.3% of that in a cannabis concentration, that is 50 milligrams of concentrated delta 9 THC. By comparison, in a state like California, we allow under our medical and adult use cannabis regime no more than 10 milligrams a serving, or 10 milligrams a serving and 100 milligrams per package. So if we go back 30 seconds to what I said is allowed under the 2018 Farm Bill, you can see where the heavier you make something, the more cannabis concentration you're allowed to have federally, and the like very clear conflict that does with marijuana on schedule.
You're talking just about federal and California, and then we've got what, 35, 40 other states also doing things slightly differently. How do you create and market and sell product across those states as a hemp business that actually you know gets your terpenes and your THC level from the plant rather than producing it in a factory? I mean, it's got to be a compliance nightmare, isn't it?
Compliance opportunity. We
Very good. You're very good. I love North Americans because everything's always an opportunity.
We do a lot of tracking of different states and what their allowances are. We do a significant amount of regulatory compliance certainty. So we test our product in the field so that it is compliant hemp. We then test our product, and it is accompanied by a certificate of analysis by a DEA licensed laboratory, and a laboratory that is also licensed by the Department of Cannabis Control in California. So we test our product as if it is a compliant cannabis product. That way, when you use our raw ingredient in products like vape pens, you're getting an all cannabis experience, cannabis sativa L, and you're getting a regulatorily compliant product. A lot of times, it's why I'm here in Washington, D.C. We also go to educate regulators and legislators so that they can draft rules that are durable, that are auditable, because that's what consumers deserve, right? You should be able to trace your products from its origin all the way until it's a finished good. So we spend a lot of time doing that so that we can foster the system that we want to live under. While there is a lot of ambiguity across different channels, the ability to provide or to infuse certainty is really what we look to do. We are a true industrial hemp product. We do not contain cannabinoids in our product, but we sell into those channels. So I have the very challenging task of understanding not only what it means to be hemp, but what it means to be hemp rolling in to some of these other state programs and their level of regulatory oversight. So it's snowflakes in a snowstorm as I'm over here.
It is. And I mean, to be honest, as chaotic as the states are, at least there's a level of understanding and desire to move forward in creating environments that actually work. You're in DC at the moment, and let's be honest, the Congress is occupied with many things, and some of them, I would say, are not particularly positive towards the words hemp or cannabis. The various government departments associated with the sort of people you have got to have discussions, the DEA, the FDA, the DOJ. Before Christmas, it gave the impression that they might be interested in a conversation. I'm at a distance. I'm reading between the lines, but I'm not seeing them wanting to engage in any conversation, and whether they've got the staff to do so, and whether there's that other issue that you mentioned earlier about research, which I presume you're paying for yourself, because public research is being reduced at a very high rate. And I imagine, yet again, hemp and cannabis related research is going to come lower and lower down the ladder of importance, for obvious reasons other than just political reasons. Am I right in my sort of assumptions that these are issues you're dealing with at the moment? And so it's not just like, it's a bit difficult to deal with explaining some policy to people. The doors seem to be a bit locked, I would guess.
Yeah, so you're talking about sort of the convergence and the divergence of what's happening with hemp and cannabis. I take a kind of rosy picture. If they're discussing you at all, you've got one foot in the game. I do agree that cannabis isn't probably one of the top 5 issues that's going on, but the president did just tout his movement on rescheduling is something that he's done in the first year that he's been in office. So whether or not it's the high priority,
he did push it off to the DOJ, and they just missed their first set of deadlines, which tells me that there's a bit of can kicking going on.
Yeah, no, there is. It's all of that momentum, right? So you have to step up to meet the moment. And if you're not even being talked about to have a deadline to miss, then you're already behind the 8 ball. So what we've seen really is an uptick in bills, to your point, that have the word cannabis or hemp in them. So we do know that this is a concept that's being discussed in the halls of Congress.
And the language for this, are they going on in bills that make sense? I mean, I've seen ridiculous things in the past where somebody drops a couple of lines in a defense bill which I still, 3 years later, I still can't get my head around. Are they actually going in bills? I don't mind them going in a big omnibus spending bill. Everything goes in those, but are they actually going in bills that sort of make sense? Or are they going in bills that they're designed to be hidden in places to hopefully bypass other people who might not want to see that stuff?
Yeah, I think a lot of times these days, especially within the overlay of this particular administration and governance time, things are going into what they call must-pass pieces of legislation packages in order to be able to move forward, because we haven't really passed standalone pieces of legislation in the recent past. So whether or not they're going into the most cohesive homes, they're finding
relevant homes, yeah.
Right. So I think that you have to take in consideration how the government is governing to where you're going to see these pieces of legislation. But we do see that FY26 language that has a cliff for hemp. So where it pulls that number that I talked about, that escalating weight function, it puts a final form package number on it at 0.4 milligrams a container, which is very, very low. What would really be helpful, I think, if anybody is listening and wants to understand how to get to meaningful policy discussions, we should stop talking about hemp or cannabis and start talking about cannabinoids and having rhetoric that specifically deals with how do consumers get a hold of cannabinoid-based products, and that go one lane and decouple and free up what the rest of this amazing cannabis sativa L plant does. And that's what Nexus and Chirping Belt really focuses on, is that non-cannabinoid input. And that's why we do so much work. To your point about research, yes, more credible, grounded, scientific information is necessary. I like to say you got to show up with what you want to do and how you want to do it. We showed up in partnership with UCLA and UC Davis and S3 to do research on understanding aromatic compounds, the actual fingerprint of flavorants in cannabis, so that we can talk about authentic cannabis flavor in inhalable products. One of the things that's very concerning and leads to overregulation is attractiveness to children products, right? Like that is one of the
That seems
reasons
to be
that
almost de rigueur these days, is to create that sort of, what they call gas station packaging, basically. I mean,
100%.
it's literally ubiquitous, and as much as they do to get rid of it, I mean, they're just shoving it from one place to another, aren't they, really?
They are, and they don't have standards for enforcement. So enforcement can't be durable if there's ambiguity, because if there is a vacuum, that vacuum is backfilled by bad actors. So what we've done when we've partnered, and the actual Department of Cannabis Control is providing funding for this research, is able to produce a flower data set based off of in-market products, so product that's purchased within the regulated supply chain. We then will be able to understand what the makeup of those aromatic compounds are. So what is the authentic flavor of cannabis? And then we can make enforcement standards so that you can get some of these really artificial products off the shelf and have durable legal standards, because we're on a
Durable
law
legal standards
podcast.
is where we all want to go, isn't it? I mean,
Exactly.
I wanted to sort of, I could get buried in Washington, D.C. and just go round and round and round in circles.
Of course.
What I'm what I'm increasingly interested now, 10 years after Prop 64, as a Californian company working with government and the DCC in California, and there's been a lot of naysaying over the past 18 months about how dreadful things are in California. As a company and as a lawyer, how are you feeling? Because I'm actually, from a distance, a bit more positive about California than most people. I don't think it's. I think actually, these things take time. It's a huge place. It's the fifth biggest or sixth biggest economy in the world. Colorado's doing really well. The Pacific Northwest is, it's getting boring up there, which means they must be doing something right. I get a sense that, okay, not everything's perfect in California, but it's moving towards that boring stage and sorting out the iggly niggly problems, as I would call them. How do you manage, as you were saying before, to present your packaging, and discuss the IP, all these, so getting down to a proper business where you can actually talk about really beginning to tighten the screws on regulation and legislation. So, as you keep saying, which is 100% right, is so the consumer knows what they're consuming. Are you? I mean, I know you're positive, but are you more positive than most about California?
Yeah, I think we're over 6 years into the game. We are learning the lessons. What's really becoming clear is what is not working, where the regulatory red tape is hitting the road. And if we want to have a effective program, we need to start addressing those gaps in regulation or understanding where overregulation is occurring. And California has that opportunity because we have a history. And yes, did a lot of businesses fail during this period? 100%. It's hard. We are a child of metamorphosis, right? The system wasn't working. We found a new outlet and we concentrated on ingredients and pivoted into not intoxicating hemp, but into terpenes. So I think that the market is returning to want to see more efficiency and effectiveness. And we've got now a new head of the Department of Regulation. So that turnover is going to create new opportunity for engagement, fresh eyes. And I think that happens iteratively over time. California isn't in a period of obsolescence. It's in a period of rebirth and regrowth of this industry.
It's 3.0 or whatever people like to say, 2.0,
Yeah.
4.0. I mean,
So
that's just the nature of the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's hard. We did have a tax increase and then we had a tax realignment back to that 15%. So whereas the industry wants to experience more dramatic wins, I think it's important that we keep a certain amount of stability. And as hard as that has been, California does show up to maintain at least some amount of continuity as it continues to evolve. We used to have the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation. Now we went through a period of having Merck HRSA. Then we had decentralized 3 different agencies. Now we have the Department of Cannabis Control. So when you look at the history of cannabis through the benefit of hindsight, sure, we could have done a better job all along, but it's continually moving forward. And if you keep, your eye on the North Star, then I think California will emerge. Like you said, it's one of the largest economies. It's one of the largest producing cannabis and hemp
And
states.
do you
So
think
as
it can get that balance between the big end of town, the middle part of town, and the just like everybody else does in agriculture? That's what interests me about California is, in agriculture, it's the mass producer, it's the medium producer, but it's also the local producer. So I've spent time in California. Nothing better than going to the market and buying organic. That's what it seems to have not quite worked out yet. Do you think it's moving towards that as well?
Yeah, we've revitalized the Appalachian Project. So we're going to see more of that in California in 2026, really talking about hyper regionality, terroir, what is coming out of California. Like you said, California is now or has always been a rich agricultural state. This is an opportunity to see an agricultural export. California cannabis has always had a cachet. Returning to that.
That's my next question for a company like yourself. Obviously, look, the US market can keep everybody going forever, but do you have designs on looking overseas? I mean, and creating a healthy American product that changes people's ideas about how people know that you get high end weed with good THC, and there's fake versions of it in London, Sydney, wherever you go in the world. My son consumes it, but what would be interesting is this next step where guys like yourself are producing, the sort of products that tell a story about Californian history and agriculture and approach to creating and reinventing the wellness world, especially. I mean, that's everybody else lives this wellness world because California invented it 30 years ago.
Sean, you hit the nail on the head. So our story is really the exportation of flavor and fragrance of California, high quality phyto materials directly from the plant, and that we can export. So as things are still very insular with regard to cannabinoids, and cannabinoids are hard to traverse both interstate and international, we can provide that solution. So you can get those aromatic compounds. That entourage effect is really meaningful when cannabinoids meet aromatic compounds and terpenes. That's where all the magic, as they say, happens, right? That's the entourage effect. We are able to provide high quality.
Have you been looking at other countries' rules and regs and thinking we can create products that, it's not like, my perfect example is Canada just repacks a bunch of stuff, sends it to a medical provider in Australia, and it was adult use in Canada, but it mysteriously becomes medical when it sold on the Australian market, and that's happening all over the world. So it's really interesting to hear, because I don't think I've heard anybody talk with this sophistication about trying to create products that know how to cross borders without having to change UN scheduling. For me, UN scheduling is a big thing. I'm putting on a conference about it and trying to bring people together to talk about these issues. So it's really interesting to hear a company talking about, an American company talking about, when they're creating their products, they're actually thinking about the regulatory environments of other jurisdictions.
Yeah, we take that seriously. I mean, America is where we are headquartered. So we're constantly looking at going through the generally recognized as safe process for use in intended food. We will look at RIFRA for fragrance. We're always thinking about how our product, which is source material, comes from the phyto plant, is able to transcend a lot of these prohibited or restricted access because of the cannabinoid material, but we're specializing in something else, something that on its own has shown therapeutic value. Terpenes have been studied. That's why we're actively in research,
Well,
actively in
you
R&D.
use the magic word entourage. That's what it's all about. Societies have known that for 1,000, 5,000 years. We're just relearning it, aren't we? With science.
Exactly. So we're doing the work. It's not always easy. As a lawyer, it is unraveling sort of like the biggest knot that you can find and pulling on the different threads and just making sure that as we build out our protocols, our standards, that we're deploying our capital in ways that are smart, partnering with universities, partnering with other businesses that have an international footprint. How can we use this plan and its architecture as scaffolding to get out other ingredients while we continue to try to understand how to navigate the cannabinoid realities, right? So that's basically what I do every day. And then I try to educate people that the plant is more than the sum of its parts. The parts are important, but it's a holistic plant and each thing needs to be treated differently.
Look, before we finish, I just wanted to, I'm Cannabis Law Report, so I write about cannabis lawyers. I have every day for 10 years. I'm really interested in the nuts and bolts of the way that you work as a in-house. Do you actually are you all on your own, or do you have a team with you? And are you working with other lawyers around the country, subcontracting out, working with them to understand or has your board put the whole job on you, basically?
I'd like to think that I quarterback, and I have a really great team. My executive team is phenomenal. The CEO of our company has a very strong vision, and he has allowed that vision to be supported by regulatory compliance, legal, and GR.
That's a fantastic thing to hear, because that's let's say that's not totally normal to put a lot of resources into words like regulatory legislation and policy. Yeah.
I've been with the company and the CEO as the company has iterated over the years. So we really built that into the foundational piece of how the company operates. And I have a team that has a compliance person, a senior hemp policy associate, and I get to work with outside individuals. So I really quarterback how we approach this, and we approach it from a dynamic place so that we can be as influential as it is possible, while also keeping true to our North Star and who we want to be as a company in a heavily regulated, oftentimes ambiguous environment. We have to educate.
Oftentimes ambiguous. I think I might have to use that in my headline for you, because that's absolutely perfect. Like, Pamela, thank you very much for being on the Karma Koala podcast and spreading a little chink of light into the world of hemp regulation, especially in DC. I'm sure it's going to stay as convoluted over the next few years, but hopefully it'll begin, as you said, to untie that knot, and you can actually start going down parallel lines, so people with not quite so many resources who actually want to get into the business can get in, understand it, and do it properly.
Sean, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for educating listeners on what is always a gray area.
It is always a gray area. And, what I say to listeners, is I'm trying to create a moment in time when I'm talking to people. So it's not just about listening to it now. Hopefully 3 or 4 years time, students want to listen to this and other people, so they really understand where we are in the process as we're having the conversation.
Well, I look forward, and I hope our paths cross again.
Thank you very much, man.
Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it. Coming how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."